Hi, welcome to the video. I'm Melissa. I write books. Are you ready? Okay, I need to start giving context before I just start talking. Or maybe I don't. I don't know. Let me know. I brought you all here today for the unfortunate news that apparently angry Redditors are often correct. And you might be thinking to yourself, what are you talking about? Because if you haven't watched like all of my vlogs all the way through, this might not make sense. So feel free to just like go check all that out, but I will give you the briefest amount of context before we get started. Also, are these Y2K headbands back? To just give you some context, we're going back and talking about kind of an older project right now. So if you've just found me recently, for the last year, have been working on a book that goes by the alias of Project Gas Station, which I've up until this point been talking about as a thriller that plays with a fake dating trope. High level, it's about a bank robber and a hostage negotiator who fake date each other for information. And one running theme that has gone throughout this project is the genre crash out, which I have had literally so many times. I have crashed out about this so many times because I would say that when I was writing it, my thought was that it is primarily a thriller because in my head, it followed all of the thriller plot points. It, like, the central motivating conflict for both of the characters was, they both had a different conflict and it was related to the thriller. Like, the conflict of the book was not, will they get together? The conflict of the book was about this other thing. But the romance subplot of will they get together? How will it work out? The like high action, high tension between the two characters was like a driving central force of the book and what kind of propelled the book forward. And so I always knew like the romance is that the romance and the thriller are very tight together. Like it's hard to distinguish which is the A plot and which is the B plot. And I had come to the conclusion that the thriller was the A plot and the romance was the B plot, making it a thriller with a high action romance. And that's how I've been querying it, as a thriller. And I say in the query letter, like it's a genre bending thriller that plays with romance elements, right? Which is fine. And I have done like decently querying that to just thriller agents. So this last week I was at this writer's retreat in Kentucky. I believe that there's already been a vlog posted about this, so feel free to watch that if you're looking for more context. But that was a very, I would say, transformative experience. And it kind of feels like a dream. I was like, you know how you go to a writer's conference and you like pay for a slot with an editor or an agent or an author or something, and you get, you can bring things for feedback and like you can have questions prepared and all of this, and you like pay for a slot. So that was not how this retreat operated at all. You applied to get in, and then once you were in, everything was like provided and included. And it was like a small group. It was about 15 of us with sort of the, I don't know if it feels weird to call them administrators because they're also like a part of the retreat. Like they're at all the meals. They're at like, we'd have a happy hour every day and like we'd ate all of our meals together. But like sort of the leaders of this group included like a very well-known author who's, you know, been Oprah's book club pick and like very well-established author, as well as an editor who currently works at a hybrid publisher and has like a 30-year career being a book editor, many of it at a big 5 publisher. Like, and then somebody else who's also involved in publishing and platform and all of that stuff. And so we had sessions with that, like organized sessions, but it was also just a lot of chatting over meals and over happy hours and getting like really valuable insight and becoming like friends with these people, which is so wild, but such a great experience. And also just it's always a good reminder that people are human, you know, like a big 5 editor is also just a really great human being too. Anyway, I was at a happy hour. Just imagine the most beautiful ranch you've ever seen. And we're talking about Ranch the Dip and also Ranch the location. And I was talking about like, I was in this, like, there's 5 of us and we were chatting with her, with the editor. And she was talking about, we we're talking about genre, just generally. Like somebody was asking what defines literary fiction, what defines upmarket fiction. So we were talking about that. And then I had like just kind of casually brought up that, oh yeah, I have a genre blending romance. And so here's how I've been writing my query letter. And the conversation started with, oh, how are you, like, what are you saying in your query letter? And I said, it's a thriller that plays with the fake dating trope. And she's like, oh, you could say that it has a high action romance. Like that's kind of a buzzy term that like would pique an agent or an editor's eye. And I'm like, that's great. And then she started asking me these questions she's like, wait, because she asked a little bit about the book. And so I was talking about how the fake dating is kind of a core like through line. Cause she asked, is it a really high action romance? Like she wanted to make sure I wasn't just going to say that when it wasn't. And I was like, yeah. And I started to kind of go through certain points in the book. Like, they have this bank robbery close call and and so then she had this look in her eye and she goes, is it a dual POV book? And I said, yeah. And she asked, does it go back and forth alternating chapters every other his and hers POV? And I said, yeah. She asked, does the romance conclude in a satisfying way? And I said, yes, but it happens a little bit early. It happens before the climax of the book. And she said, okay, you're writing a romance. And I said, don't do this to me. Obviously, I didn't say that. I said, oh, okay. Here's the thing. It's not that I've never thought that this was primarily a romance with a thriller subplot. Like, this has been the driving conundrum of this book since I wrote it. Like, from the beginning, you can go back and see me thinking and going back and forth. And when I posted my query letter on Reddit, I had people saying, like, this isn't a thriller, it's a romance. But they said it in kind of a rude way. And I was like, no, I've already thought through all of this. Like, I know why it's a thriller. And I had all these reasons why in my head it had to be a thriller. And so I actually, in this conversation with her, asked, like, okay, but the central conflict isn't about the romance. Like, there's all these other things. Like, they're both striving for these different goals. And she's like, that's actually good. In a romance, you want the characters to have goals and motivations that are separate from the romance. And I was like, okay, but the climax, they're already together. Like, they're kind of working through the climax as a couple, but not really. Like, it's sort of separate. And she's like, that's actually good too. Like, it's an interesting, like, the way she responded to that was crazy. She was like, oh yeah, that's actually good, because like most romances, there's the big third act breakup, and that's like been done before. So this is actually good that they are together during the climax of the book. Like, that makes it interesting. And then I was like, okay, but, and then internally I'm crashing out. But also it's a different kind of crash out where, of course, it's like jarring to hear like, okay, maybe you were on the wrong side of what you thought this book was. But there's also something settling about it, of like this fundamental knowing that it's right. And we talked more about, and I brought up like all the reasons I've talked about on this channel about why it's a thriller. I'm like, but it goes dark. And she's like, that's good. Like, people are looking for that. Like, there's a spot in the market for that. I just kept going back to like their primary motivation, like the primary conflict of the book isn't will they get together. And she said, what makes something a thriller, or what makes something a romance, is that like the conflict doesn't need to be, I need a man, I need a woman, I need a partner. The conflict needs to be all the reasons why they can't be with this other person. Like, that's what propels the story forward, is the conflict has to be a reason why they can't be together. And when I think about it, that's actually really true of this book, which is crazy to me. And I'd always thought that, like, because Danny's conflict is about solving this case, and Cal's conflict is about keeping his sister safe. Like, these are in the most vague terms possible. And so I thought, like, those are thriller conflicts. And they are, but that doesn't mean it's a thriller. Like, I think I had thought because the romance isn't the most important thing in both of their lives, that meant it couldn't be a romance. But then I think back to other, even like pure romances that I've read. Like, I think about Promise Me Sunshine, which is a book about grief pretty much, but it is a romance. Being in a relationship is not the most important thing in their lives. And like wanting the other person isn't the most important thing. Am I saying Thriller, like that gas station, as the book that it is right now, could sit on a romance shelf? No, I don't think it could. I think that at its core, yes, but there would need, like, I would need to read through it and change a few things and really bring the romance into the ending more. Because I hadn't thought of it as a romance before. Once they get together, it's just like they're working together in the climax of the book, right? But because that wasn't my focus, like there's not a lot of moments in the climax of the book that as a romance reader you would be expecting. So I would definitely need to read through the book again. Like just pull the romance out a little bit, which I have been doing. Also, if you watch the vlogs where I'm doing later stage editing on this book, that is what I'm doing, is I'm pulling the romance forward more. Like I have a whole note on my wall that says make Danny hornier the whole book. Like I have really pulled the romance out of this book, and it does hit all of the beats of a romance novel. And so I have a few disclaimers I want to add onto this, because when I was talking to this editor and I was kind of challenging, is it a romance, you know? And at a certain point she was like, don't be afraid of it being a romance. Like romances sell well. And I realized, like, I forget that there's this whole impression of romances that like writing romance is somehow lesser, or like a woman's like blah. Like there's all of this misogyny around the romance genre and like this impression that it doesn't sell well, when in fact like romance is like the best selling genre of all time. And so I just want to disclaim here, like, I would love to be a romance author. Like, I think I'd had it in my head that I was a thriller author for so long. And I think that's why every book I write, I'm like, this is a thriller because that's what I write. And yes, there's a heavy romance subplot, but like, I'm a thriller writer. And I don't know why that was so stuck in my head. It's not that I don't want to be a romance author. Like, I love romance. I mostly read romance. Meredith was actually asking me this. I was talking to her about it, and she was like, is there a reason you don't want to be a romance author? And I was like, do I have like some sort of deep-seated like, oh, I think I'm better than romance? I really don't think so. I just had always, I think the thing that had stopped me from thinking of myself as a romance writer is that I want my books to go dark and to have a real conflict and real stakes in a thrillery way. Like I want people to really be in danger. And I'd been under this impression that that can't happen in a romance. And I just don't think that's true. And like as it settles in, like more and more waves of like realization come over you, you know? It's sort of freeing in a way of like, yes, this changes things, but it really doesn't change things at all. Because the moments that I love the most about my books are the romance moments. The things I love the most about the book, like I will say this, and I hadn't thought of it in romance terms, but I love the reunions, and I love the tension, and I love the drama, and I love the like the points of conflict that I love are usually between the two main characters, not even with the main villain. And like I always struggle the most with coming up with the actual twist of the book and the actual thrill of the book. And I think I'd always seen that as just a weakness in my writing, when really I'm just writing a romance. And so I don't know. It makes a lot of sense to me. Like the yearning and the tension and the drama and the reunions, like that's what the romance is, Alyssa. That's what and so I actually really think I'm happy with it though. The way that I've been thinking of myself, thinking of my books as thrillers first has allowed me to like really take the thriller plot really seriously and make sure that it comes together well. Because what I wouldn't want to happen is to think of the book like, oh, this is a romance novel, so the thriller doesn't really need to be that crazy. Like the thriller element of it doesn't need to be that complex. Like I feel like if I had viewed all of my books as primarily romance, I would not have taken the thriller elements as seriously. And I'm really glad that I have, and I'm glad that I will take that into my future books. We'll get there. I don't know. So that's just what I want to say, is that I'm happy to be a romance writer, and I really think that I am now. And we don't need to put ourselves in boxes. Like some of the books I have written are thrillers. Like The Wedding Season is a thriller. There's a big romance subplot, but the romance is not nearly as significant as it is in Gas Station. Similarly, Near the End of June, that one could also be a romance probably. But that one is also a thriller. But like The Wedding Season is a thriller first. but gas station isn't. And you might be thinking to yourself, Alyssa, what does this mean for querying? Because if you don't know, I've been querying Project Gas Station as a thriller for like 3 months. I've actually sent out all of the queries that I have, like all of the agents who represent thriller who would accept my book. And I've gotten 4 requests, like I'm doing decently well. I have 2 fulls out right now. And you know what's crazy about those is that both of the agents who have them primarily represent romance. What is my plan, you might ask? So I'm fully working on a different book. Project Sunshine, which we'll get to that and how that kind of plays into all of this in a second. But my current plan with Project Gas Station is to see what happens. I'm not going to immediately jump into revising it or editing it to be more of a romance, but I am going to, when I hear back from both of these fulls, and if I don't get any other requests in the meantime, if I've like exhausted my options and I don't have any fulls out, then I'm going to read the book again and see if I can edit it and then actually make it fully a romance with the thriller B plot, which here's the crazy, I don't think it's going to be that huge of a change, truly. Like it might just be adding in, I think mostly at the end, it would be some edits of making sure that like that love confession scene, if there is one, I don't know, spoiler, making those like the romance tropes and elements like really come forward, which I think would be honestly line level edits because nothing with the thriller plot would change because we're not touching that at this point, but just how they interact and maybe just bumping it up a little. And then there would be so many more agents I could query if this was a romance. Like romance, so many people represent romance who don't represent thriller. And I have been feeling weird about querying this book anyway, because it felt like a lot of the agents I was querying who represent thriller like weren't looking for this type of thriller. And I'm realizing it's probably because the type of thriller I'm writing is actually a romance. And so if I think back, all of the people who requested this book really represent romance and maybe saw the query and was like, she's saying it's a thriller, but this might, I don't know. I'm not going to talk for them. And like, there is a world where this, like I might be coming back on this channel in a couple months and being like, actually, it's a thriller. Just kidding. But I can't be blind to this. This makes it sound so dramatic, but I can't look at like, this is an industry professional who knows what she's talking about. Like, true, she hasn't read the book, but she knows what she's talking about in terms of genre, in terms of marketability, in terms of elements, you know? And that doesn't mean that I have to listen to every single thing she says, but it would be really ignorant, I think, for me to not listen to that. And it's been easy to ignore people saying this in the past because it's people who didn't read the book, who are random people on Reddit, random people in my comment section who hadn't read the book, who didn't know the full scope of it, who didn't know details like this editor knows details. And it was not an overwhelming majority of people who were telling me it was a romance, but it was easier to ignore them because I had all these reasons why it had to be a thriller. And I was clinging to them so tightly. And so coming to terms with the fact that it like hearing that and hearing like all of the reasons just be reduced to dust with a simple, well, that's okay. It can be like that and still be a romance. It would be easy for me to ignore that and be like, she hasn't read the book, she doesn't know. I don't need to change anything. But frankly, what do I have to lose with this book if nothing comes back positive? I'm actually pretty hopeful about the ones I have out because if they also represent romance, and so I could see them seeing it clearly for what it is, you know? If everything comes back as no's and I want to revise it a little bit and I get a bunch of no's back, same spot as I was before. Yeah. So where does this bring us? Where does this bring us with all of the other projects? So I think for future projects, it's going to make it much simpler or easier because I will know going into it that like I am querying this as a thriller or as a romance. I really love the sort of genre mix I found myself in where it's like thriller elements with rom-com tropes with a really heavy sweeping romance at the center. And now just knowing and like going dual POV back and forth, alternating chapters of the romantic leads. It's a romance. It's a romance. And so I think knowing that is actually going to make future thrillers much easier to plot. And I won't be having this identity crisis because I'll know like this is a romance with a thriller, a huge thriller subplot. Like they're almost intertwined, right? But it will make it easier to make decisions about the book because I need to center the romance in the book. And I think had I had that while revising and editing Gas Station, it would have made it a lot clearer and easier because I would have known, like, does this decision serve the central romance? No, yes, maybe, right? But again, I'm actually really glad for the way that this has gone because it has helped me take the thriller plots really seriously and know how to handle them as a main plot. And so I think that will make these thriller plots in these romances really strong because I've spent so much time really focusing on making the thriller satisfying. So for future books, I actually have a few books in mind, like plot ideas that I think is going to make it easier, or not easier, but that I will be using all of this for. The kind of tricky point I'm in right now is with Project Sunshine, which is my current work in progress. It's what I've been drafting recently. And the reason I think it's going to be kind of sticky is because I've recently been, like before this retreat, I had been thinking about Sunshine, that it really is so much more of a thriller than it is a romance, and that like it just goes a little bit darker and it would feel disingenuous to make it a romance, and like all of these things about why it was a thriller. Like it's much twistier. It's very much more twistier than all of the other books I've ever written. Frankly, it has bigger twists and turns. And so now I'm kind of stuck with this dilemma of how do I go about this? Because it does alternate back and forth. And then not that necessarily makes it a romance, like that's not the main thing, but it is kind of a it is a convention of the thriller, of the romance genre. Good Lord. And the other point of contention with that, I'm probably going to have another video crashing out about this, so just hold your breath for that one or don't. I haven't really written the second half yet at all. I have done a draft of this book, believe it or not, but the second half, like really, there's nothing there from the first. So I need to decide before I go into the second half, am I really going to bring the romance center and make this a romance? Or am I going to keep it where it's at and keep it as a thriller? Like, I think either way I will keep the plot I have. It will just make a difference to a few things if it becomes primarily a romance. And also I'm kind of thinking about shelving it for a bit. This is a spiral for a different time, but I just can't decide if I want to finish it as a thriller that has really tone down the romance elements, or ramp up the romance and just kind of lean into it. And I'm leaning towards the second, actually. I'm leaning towards, it's weird, it's out there, it's kind of crazy, but it is a romance. And I'll talk about why in a future video because I actually, at this retreat, also had conversations about that. And so that will be a topic for another time. But I feel like this is something that's been building, that I've been grappling with internally and not really giving a lot of attention to, because it doesn't, at the end of the day, it also doesn't really make a difference into how much I pour into the thriller elements, because I still want that thriller to be strong. But I think just having someone say it so clearly, like it's so obvious. It just and she even said during this conversation, she's like, I don't want to derail you. Like, if you want this to be a thriller, it can be. And I was like, no, it's not that I'm just listening blindly to whatever she said. It's just, it's like when someone says something, or it is when someone says something and it just is so true. And it's so true that you can't ignore it. I'm not saying that about every book I've ever written or every book I will write, but about Gas Station, it just is. And that's good, I think, because my biggest comp, we've been down this crisis road before. The biggest comp for Gas Station is The Blonde Identity, which is a romance. I think I'm actually going to read this book again because I think the stakes do go dark. And I think I had been ignoring that because I was like, no, it's a romance. It can't get, I was just trying to reassure myself that I was right instead of actually looking to see if I was about genre. You could see it as a derailment. And for a second, I thought of it as a derailment, but actually I think it's like a turning point. I think it's going to make it easier to write in the future because I'm not going to have to debate and decide which is it. Because also I have a choice to make. Like if I don't want to write romance, I don't have, like I could write thrillers that are just really thrillery, but I don't want to do that. I had this, like this is what really sunk in the decision for me that where like going forward, I want to write romances that are romantic suspense pretty much, which is crazy because I've said that I don't write romantic suspense so many times. And I think technically this is romantic suspense, but not in like a sexy man way. It's more a romance with a strong thriller subplot, like where it's a primary romance. A high action romance, what might I say. How I realized, like I came to the decision that regardless of whatever my past books were, we can decide what genre those are individually and we can debate about it as a class. Going forward, that's what I want to write, is that if I took out all of the romance and like any of that from my books, I wouldn't want to write them. And that was kind of the deciding factor for me. And so here I am to say that I was wrong. I have gone back and forth so many times and always come to the conclusion that I was right. And all of those times I was wrong, and that's okay. And I think I needed to be wrong about it. And I needed to, like, there was a reason I kept coming back to that debate because I kept coming to the wrong conclusion. And I don't think it's led me astray. Like, I think it led me to the book being as strong as it is in the thriller subplot, which is crazy to call it a thriller subplot. It happened the way it was meant to happen, as things always do. And now, regardless of where, even if I got a call from an agent today, I would talk with them about, I would bring this into that conversation. And they might say, like, this is what's so funny about this is I could be turning around tomorrow and be saying, actually, it's a thriller. Just kidding. I'm marketing, you know. But like for me, for now, this is where I'm going. And it's actually giving me a lot of clarity and peace about who I am as a writer and the stories that I want to tell. So there's the great genre crash out final installment. Because now I know what genre I'm writing now. Like I think I have been writing this way my whole journey. And now it's like a clarity of here's how you package this. Here's how you present this. The heart of my story is actually coming into awareness. Anyway, thank you for listening. I literally knitted 2 stitches. Comment down below any sort of heart emoji because we're writing romance. And I will see you so soon. Okay, bye.